And so we've got a presentation on firefighting and recent developments in firefighting. FDNY is a leader in high-rise firefighting by necessity. We have a Deputy Assistant Chief, Jim Hodgens, here with us today. He's currently a director of the probationary firefighters training school. Prior to that, he was a deputy chief here in Midtown Manhattan. And if you know the FDNY, that's kind of nationally one of the premier assignments for expertise in high-rise firefighting. He's going to give his remarks, and somebody walked off with the mic. Is that okay? Hopefully he doesn't take that with him. Scott, you want to chase him down? He has the mics. Okay. So where were we? Chief Hodgens. So let me let him get started, and here he is.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay, and the clicker
is.
Where's
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, great.
Here you are. We're going
Thanks,
to darken the lights.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Charles. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Hodgens. Like Charles said, I'm Chief in Charge of the Fire Academy at Randall's Island. I have 33 years of experience. You don't speak to the mic, I won't get recorded. I have 33 years of experience in the FDNY. I'm very fortunate. I worked throughout the whole city. I started my career in Brooklyn as a firefighter, lieutenant as a firefighter also in Brooklyn. And then when I got promoted to captain, I worked in the South Bronx. And as a battalion chief, I worked in Midtown Manhattan, a deputy chief also in Midtown Manhattan. When I first got promoted to deputy chief back in 2007, I was asked to go down to the Bureau of Fire Prevention and help out. And to me, the phrase goes, no good deed goes unpunished. So, but when I went down fire prevention, it was a good chain of events for me because I learned about the fire code. I didn't know as much about the fire code. And a good friend of mine, Jack Murphy, who's sitting in front, said, Jim, I think you should get involved in codes. And at first, reluctantly, I said, Jack, I don't want anything to do with the fire codes, but I soon realized how important it was as firefighters. I was picked to be on the International Building Code, and I represented New York City, out in Sacramento, California, and down in Baltimore, and I was on the Means of Egress Committee. And I shortly learned after that I didn't know what my role was as a firefighter. And I was a little intimidated because there was all engineers and architects on the panel, and I was voting on the building code. And the first night, one of the engineers said to me, you're very important to this because you're an end user. And so I learned about drivers, and I also learned about constraints today, but now I know that I'm an end user. And as far as how the codes are enforced, I become an end user, and so it's very important. So in the FDNY, we, unfortunately, a lot of our codes are enacted after a major disaster. So I'm just going to go through some of a brief history of where we are today and how we developed some of our tactics and procedures. So where research meets reality, and we were very fortunate here in the FDNY. We were able to do some studies with NIST and UL out at Governor's Island on wind-driven fires. So fires that shaped our firefighting operation in high-rise buildings. Okay, One New York Plaza, August 5th, 1970, was a major disaster in high-rise firefighting. But as a result of this fire, the 50-story office building that was built in 1969, we enacted what was called Local Law 5. And Local Law 5 required sprinklers in high-rise office buildings, fire safety directives, compartmentation, which didn't exist before that, automatic elevator recall. We knew at this fire, the elevator went up to the 32nd floor, and this is where the two workers were killed. Protection of steel members.
This is NBC Nightly News. With John Chancellor, who is off tonight, Roger Mudd in New York, and tonight's special segment, Real Athletes, Phony Students.
Good evening. At least 75 people have died today in a fire in the biggest hotel in Las Vegas. Another 300 were injured. The fire was in the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino, which was built in 1973. About 1,000 people escaped by fleeing to the hotel roof, where they were lifted off by helicopters. A county official said the blaze may have started from a grease fire in the kitchen of a ground floor delicatessen. We have a report from Frank Burkholzer.
The fire began shortly after 7 in the morning and spread throughout the ground floor casino and the famous showroom in a matter of minutes, sending thick black smoke up through the entire 26-story structure. The Grand has more than 2,000 rooms. There were believed to be some 4,500 guests in the hotel. Many of them tried to get fresh air by breaking windows.
We knocked the windows out, and then we merely followed instructions. Got on the floor so we couldn't inhale so much smoke and got towels.
The smoke that guests let in by breaking those windows caused many of the deaths and injuries, according to fire officials. Rescue crews moved in quickly to attend to the hundreds who rushed to safety in the streets or thronged balconies or made their way to the roof for rescue by helicopter.
So what did we do in New York City as a result? We passed another law, right? Local law 16, which applies to fire safety directors in hotels, which didn't exist before that. The previous fire, One Police Plaza, is where we enacted Local Law 5, required fire safety directors, sprinklers, compartmentation, elevator recall for office buildings. Now, we reacted to a disaster, but this wasn't a local disaster. This happened out in Las Vegas. So now we enacted Local Law 16 in New York City, which requires all the same provisions for office building inside a hotel. Again, automatic elevator recall, seismic joints, right? Fire spread through the upper floors like we just saw with the World Trade Center, same thing that just happened. Vertical openings, including stairways and elevator shafts, and HVAC systems not automatically shutting down, which we have today as a result of Local Law 5 and Local Law 16. Okay, First Interstate Bank, Los Angeles, California. Similar tragic event, right? As a result, in Los Angeles, California, they required them to retrofit every office building and sprinkle them. And when did we do that here in New York City? Not until after September 11th. You know, Commissioner and Chief of Department John O'Hagan back in 1973 pushed for sprinklers, full sprinklerization for Local Law 5 back in 1973. And unfortunately, there was other competing influences. We could not sprinkler, we had compartmentation, and we learned that compartmentation doesn't work. Right? As a result, Local Law 26 after September 11th requires every office building in New York City to retrofit their floors. Flame spread vertically throughout the building. Lessons learned, again, it's when we enact codes, right? We enact these codes, right? Drivers, constraints, and end users. That's what we are, firefighters, end users. Civilians, we're end users. When we enact these codes, they make buildings safer for all of us. Okay, in New York City, right, Local Law 5, you cannot travel more than 4 floors and you'll find an openable door. In California, it's for every 5 floors, right? Pre-fire emergency plan, right? Local Law 5 required every office building to have a fire plan. Local Law 26 required every high-rise office building to have a non-fire emergency plan, something enacted after Local Law 26. Fires that shaped our firefighting operations in high-rise buildings. So where are we today in the FDNY? Now we come closer. Now we're getting directly involved in research with UL out at Governor's Island. And as the chief in charge of the Fire Academy, it's very important that I emphasize the why. Why should we know, right? Why should we know? The only way we're going to change behavior is if people know how and how it affects them directly. So why should we know and why should I care, right? So when we train our firefighters, if they understand the why, they're more likely to change their behavior. The studies we did out in Governor's Island directly result.
The date was November 7th, 2002, a year after 9/11.
Tragic
I was
fire we
working
had in
in ladder
Queens.
165 as a covering officer. We had lunch. An alarm came in. When we arrived, I did my perimeter search. I saw that there were 3 basement windows fully involved. So we know we have the basement fire. The engine company had gotten there before us. We go in. As we're crawling in, we suited up. We're crawling in. My ironsman asks if he can take a window to help get some of the smoke out. Right now,